Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to George McCrory, the Chief Deputy Chief of Party, USAID Trader. George has over 25 years experience working in programs aimed at enhancing regional integration and strengthening the region's competitiveness, focusing on trade, investment, policy issue, standards, communication, and project management. George, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Neil. Good afternoon, everybody, and a warm welcome. Welcome to those that have attended this series of webinars in the past, and all those that are attending for the first time. My name is George McCrory, as was highlighted earlier by Neil. I work for the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. Now, the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub is a USAID-funded project. It operates out of Pretoria, but we work in 8 countries in the SADC region, out of the 16 SADC countries. And these countries are led by South Africa. Then we also work in Eswatini. Today, we're going to be listening to Tammy here, who is actually from Eswatini. We also have presence in Lesotho, Namibia, Botswana. We also have presence in Mozambique, Zambia, and Malawi. So those are the 8 countries we work in. Now, in these 8 countries, our role is really to work with organizations, firms like some of the firms that you come from, to increase sustainable economic growth, global export competitiveness, and also trade in those countries as well as our region. We have 3 main objectives as a project. The first objective being looking at 7 countries that are in addition to South Africa. So we're looking at, for example, Eswatini, working with companies from Eswatini that would want to export products that they produce into South Africa. So all the 7 countries other than South Africa, we identify partners that we can assist or work with to export products into South Africa. The second objective looks at identifying funders or financiers in South Africa. And in this case, we are looking at both funding and technology transfer from South Africa into the 7 countries that I mentioned earlier, in order to assist those companies to be able to increase production, to be able to meet standards and other needs that they might require. Then the third objective is one of the reasons that we are all here today for, which is exporting to the US under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, popularly known as AGOA program. And we work with all the 8 countries and look at the products that are AGOA eligible, over 6,500 product lines. And we then help to identify buyers in the US who will be interested in products from the region. So we work with companies in that area. So those are the main areas that we look at in the 8 countries that I've mentioned. So for today's webinar, for today's meeting, we're going to be looking at fashion and products that are required in the US. And we have got a number of experts that are going to take us through that. To help us go through that program, I'm going to call upon Tammy Dlamini, who is the USAID Trader country representative for Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. And Tammy is the one who leads our activities in Eswatini. Tammy comes from a background of trade, and the activities that we are looking at today, Tammy is experienced in that area.
So we are going to start off with Beth. Just a brief on Beth. Beth is responsible for supporting the association's effort on international trade and customs issues. Beth oversees trade policy, the Trade Policy Committee, as well as AAFA's Customs Group. Before joining the American Apparel and Footwear Association, Beth served for 6 years as Senior Director for International Affairs at the International Dairy Foods Association. She earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science at George Washington University, and also received a Master of Arts in International Affairs from Florida State University. Beth, over to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. It is my pleasure to talk to you about what we're doing at AAFA. So thank you to All Fashion Sourcing and USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. My name is Beth Hughes. I'm the VP of Trade and Customs Policy for the American Apparel and Footwear Association. And I'm excited today to present to you on US textiles and apparel sourcing trends and the impact of COVID-19 on consumer behavior and distribution channels. So just a little bit about us. The American Apparel and Footwear Association is the national trade association representing apparel, footwear, and other sewn products companies and their suppliers, which compete in the global market. Representing more than 1,000 world famous name brands, retailers, and manufacturers, AAFA is the trusted public policy and political voice of the apparel and footwear industry. Its management and shareholders, its 4 million US workers, and its contribution of $400 billion in annual US retail sales. AAFA provides exclusive expertise in supply chain management, trade policy, and brand protection to help our members navigate the complex regulatory environment and lower costs. Members gain unparalleled access to information and exclusive insights on regulation and policy, and premier opportunities for networking and collaboration. So for today's discussion, I'd like to focus on these 3 items here on the screen. What's happening in the current situation, some lessons learned, and then opportunities for Africa. So where do we stand? Where are we now? Basically, here in the United States, all imports are down from where they were last year. And much of that, of course, is driven by the disruption from the pandemic. You can see from the period January through July of 2020, apparel is down 11.3% from the same time last year. Footwear is down over 30% from 2019, and travel goods is down almost 24% from 2019. We're seeing large drops in imports from just about all countries, except for AGOA countries. That imports are only down about 2%, and that's mostly due to Ethiopia's growth of 36%. So, the question is, why is this happening? Of course, people are staying home. They're working from home. Their businesses are either closed temporarily or to curb the spread of COVID-19. People have been told to continue to work from home for the foreseeable future. Stores are closed or temporarily are closed. We still have many stores that only allow a certain amount of people in at various times throughout the day to keep the social distancing protocols in place. So we're definitely seeing a significant decline in imports because the demand has dropped. People don't need certain items as much as they might have before because they're not going into the office, they're not traveling as much. So furthermore, we've seen the supply chain disruptions also. And that's due to country lockdowns, of course, and factory closures around the globe due to the pandemic. So that's what's caused this decline. So if we look back just at April, for example, sales in clothing stores and shoe stores were down 89.3% from the same time period last year. That's huge. But by August, we've seen that sales have improved a little bit. So we're only down about 24%. But if we think about that, that's still down considerable amount from the previous year. And all of this, of course, is due to the pandemic and the closures. So if we look at department stores, it's a similar story. In April, sales were down about 45% from the same time period last year. And by August, we've seen that improve considerably, but still down 16.7% for the same time period. So these numbers are getting better as our economy starts to recover, but there is a sustained drop in demand, and that sustained drop will continue over the long term. We are expected to have more spikes from the pandemic, which may cause more closures, which will keep people home, and the demand will remain low. So we are seeing a lot of changes as well at retail. First, there's been a huge growth in e-commerce, of course. Consumers are buying more online, more so than ever due to the pandemic. They're having it shipped directly to their homes. They're also buying online and having it shipped to the store, or maybe they can just do a curbside pickup. So that's definitely increasing. You can see that e-commerce sales are up about 30% this past June versus the same time last year. We're also having continued closures of stores, like I mentioned earlier, as retailers have continued to keep some locations temporarily closed due to the pandemic protocol. Others have closed locations permanently, either because they aren't performing as well, which may be a little bit more to the norm as consumers, to my earlier point, have decided to turn to e-commerce and buying more of their products online rather than going into the store. And then some are closing permanently, and that's maybe due to bankruptcies that we've seen over the past few months. We're seeing a record number of these bankruptcies, actually, 27 so far. And the story is not over, as there is still considerable turmoil and uncertainty. So not all bankruptcies result in companies going out of business, but they do result in long-term changes to the retail landscape. So we have new owners and new directions, a lot of new players. And in the short term, they also mean challenges, as transactions with a company in bankruptcy proceedings are obviously much more difficult. So, and third, we have changes in what people are actually buying. So there's less demand for business suits, as you can imagine, since we're all working from home. You may have a nice, business top, but be casual, or have leisure on the bottom, as the majority of our interactions are similar to today over Zoom or other platforms. So what we like to say over here is, we're business above the keyboard, and then we're comfort below the keyboard. And then, of course, face masks are becoming more and more part of our normal everyday wardrobe. So, how long are we going to be wearing, these face masks for? We don't know at this point. Like I said, we might have more spikes, at least here in the United States. And of course, that would we'd expect that globally as well. But they are becoming more fashionable. People are getting more used to wearing them. I know my children wear them when they go to the store. And so they're becoming a little bit more fashionable. You can buy them everywhere now. And, it is a lifeline. It's how we can get outside. It's how we can go to the store. But here in the United States, it can also be a political statement, unfortunately. So that's what we're seeing right there with face masks as well. So I just wanted to turn real quickly to some lessons that we've learned during this pandemic, and even before. Of course, today, China accounts for about 56% of all US travel goods imports. And that's down actually from 85% in 2016. 59% of all US footwear imports, and that is down 73% since 2016. And then China accounts for 30% of all US apparel imports, which is down 41% since 2016. So that means that more and more companies are diversifying out of China right now, and that's for many reasons. We do recognize, that China is still the fastest growing market, so you still want to be able to service the needs of that market. And many suppliers are still sourcing from China, of course, so they're dependent on China for inputs. We saw a lot of that this year, especially in the United States, with the personal protective equipment, such as face masks and other items that were being produced in China and exported around the globe, but especially to China, or to the United States, rather. So we realized just how dependent we were on China. And with the trade war that we already were experiencing for a number of years, the growing anti-sentiment surrounding China has been accelerating. And that means many more companies are looking to diversify out of that region. They're rethinking their supply chains, though. So not just trying to get just out of China, they're just thinking about how they want to be more vertical, more regional. So they want to be closer to the market that they want to service. They want to be sustainable and nimble. So like what I was talking about earlier with, being, realizing the e-commerce boom. They want to make sure that they're able to be nimble and flexible and participate in e-commerce as well, and not just rely on the stores. Okay, so finally, I just wanted to touch base on the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA. There is a great opportunity, I think, for Africa, as, like I said, more companies are diversifying their supply chains. They're either leaving China or they're looking for more vertical or regional supply chains. Luckily for us, AGOA doesn't expire until 2025. So trade will continue for the next 5 years, of course. But that expiration date, even though it's only 5 years away, we've seen that US investment in the region already faces uncertainty. Companies are poised to diversify out of China, and Africa is a logical place for them. So the on-again, off-again nature of the program before the 10-year renewal that we saw previously was extremely disruptive and meant the industry was not able to take advantage of the first 15 years of AGOA. So if AGOA were to be renewed right now for about another 10 years, we think that companies would have that necessary certainty and time frame they need to grow a more vertical and responsible and competitive industry in Africa up to and past 2025. AGOA's renewal will need to accommodate the overall US goal of negotiating free trade agreements with beneficiaries of AGOA. And we've told our Congress and our administration that we think that AGOA should be renewed now for another 10 years so that we can re-inject that predictability to support investment well ahead of the current 2025 expiration. So I'm going to leave you with that. I appreciate your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions once we get to that portion of the program. Thank you.
Okay, we are moving on now. Lene is our next speaker. Lene Ferretti is the CEO of Bavana World Project. Lene believes in all brands and SMEs that Bavana supports across the globe. She finds their talent and unique vision a breath of fresh air in a congested marketplace. Lene is passionate to raise the profile and opportunities for these companies, and most of these will provide opportunities within marginalized populations. We, as the USAID Trade Hub, work with Lene a lot. We are identifying quite a few entrepreneurs that Bavana World is helping to gain access into the US market and other markets. So we know that this session will be quite valuable, especially to our firms. Lene, over to you.
So welcome everyone, and it's a great honor to be with you today to talk about how to stand out and be competitive in the US market as a Southern African fashion supplier. And so the product categories I'm going to focus on are fashion, apparel, accessories, and footwear. And I'm going to talk a bit about trend in the marketplace and also what to look for to be more competitive when interacting and reaching out to the US market. So let's get started. Also, I should say all the products that you're seeing here are all made in Southern Africa. And we at Bahabana have been working with these suppliers and finding, as Tammy said, so much potential and opportunity in their brands. And so look forward to working with them further and continue to connect them to the US market. Okay, so starting out, let's look at what some consumer market trends are. And understanding the trends of how consumers are looking at products helps you to stand out. Now, this is all within the context, of course, of COVID-19. And Beth laid out the situation as far as purchases and purchase levels and how they have been impacted by COVID. But I wanted to also talk about consumer trend direction and where consumers are headed and what their values are. Because understanding this will help you as an organization and as a business align to those values and put that into your messaging and marketing as well as your practices in your business. And so we look at the Gen Z demographic, which now makes up 40% globally of all consumers, and that equals 150 billion in the United States alone. These are younger shoppers. They're becoming the largest demographic. And the fashion industry needs to become aware of their expectations and demands because their footprint as a demographic will continue to grow. They're interested in quality and price, as all consumers are, but they have additional values that they look for in a company, and that includes the mission of the company itself and the values that that company represents, practices of sustainability, inclusivity, and traceability. And I'll go through that a bit more in each of the trend areas. So let's talk about sustainability first. Gen Z is very committed to environmental issues, more so than any other generation before. And they're continuing to put pressure on the fashion industry to clean up its act. Most of us know that the fashion industry does contribute to about 10% of annual global carbon emissions, and the consumption rate has increased over 50% over the next 10 years if this pace continues. Fast fashion has been part of that, the dumping of goods or purchasing things with a fast turn in fashion. And so this demographic is interested in purchasing products that are of higher quality, that will last longer, and that will reduce the fashion industry's waste on our environment. So within that, they are very interested in this, in a transparent supply chain. And we'll hear more about this with our next speaker, but that the industry needs to overcome our struggle with sustainability and be transparent and provide transparency to these consumers who have this higher level of environmental commitment and expect to understand what a company's environmental footprint is on before purchasing. 45% of these shoppers will do research prior to making a commitment to shop with a particular company. And this traceability has begun in other industries like the food industry. And so the fashion industry needs to catch up for Gen Z consumers to be able to support these brands. And we'll see greater pressure put on the fashion industry to prove sustainable practices and traceability through their supply chains. And brands will need to scrutinize their own practices and the practices of their partners and suppliers to be able to provide transparency to their customers within the supply chain. And this photo is a photo of Fashion Revolution, which is a campaign that is based in Europe that demands traceability in the fashion industry. And then there's technology. And as Beth said earlier, we are all engaging in technology in a very different way than we had previous to COVID-19. It is impacting how we're consuming products through online sales. And so this generation expects an integrated supply chain model that is able to move from online to in-store experience. And so they expect to have that kind of service available. It's not that they don't see the benefit of stores, but they want that technology leveraged to be able to have a more cohesive and multi-channel approach to their experience. And so we know that from the National Retail Federation, these shoppers are checking their smartphones while they're in the stores, comparing prices or showing things to their family and friends and asking for advice. So technology, we all know, has ramped up to a new level that our industry will have to embrace to continue to grow. So these are major outward facing, I would say, market trends. Trends, and Tammy said earlier, the consumer drives, their purchases drive the demand. So understanding what's important to them is useful to be able to know when you're facing the market with your company, what are the messages and what are the practices that should be first and foremost to attract this new and growing consumer. So now there's the part about being competitive. So we can know what the market demands, but we also have to understand how to competitively serve that market. And so I'm going to go through a few points that will help, hopefully help to understand some of the pitfalls and also some processes that are necessary to serve the US market most efficiently. So I start with operations and production management. This doesn't always seem obvious, or maybe seems like it is a given, but in many small companies in particular, there are a few people wearing a few hats. And the recommendation is that for an operation that is manufacturing a product for sale, that there is a delineation between production management and operations management. Production management meaning those activities that deal with the manufacturing of the product itself, the time utilization, the cost utilization, the control of capital and labor to make that product, and really the internal looking within the organization of how to maximize your production. The management operation deals strictly or more directly with the consumer themselves. There's less labor, but there's more need for continual touch and communication with that customer. It requires less capital, but more service and constant contact. And what can happen is there can be a little bit of, both of these roles can play an advocate for the area that they represent. And so production may have particular time restraints or cost restraints, and operations may have a particular buyer requirement. And by having these roles more clearly delineated, it can help to mitigate some of the conflict that can come up, or you can address those questions directly within the organization before going out to the buyer. And it keeps focus on these two very important aspects of business. One, managing production quality and timing, and the other, managing your customers. When we talk about product design attributes, it's not only product aesthetics. I akin to product design in our industry more as an architect than an artist. There is a lot of engineering that needs to go on for a product to be successful. So what are some of those attributes? Utility. The product should perform a purpose, and it should perform that purpose to the customer over the life cycle of that product. And what we've heard from this consumer is they're expecting longer life cycles, which means higher quality. So the functionality and the life cycle of the product becomes very important. The aesthetic, of course, which is a bit more subjective, but is important based on the market and the buyer that you're serving, and that your aesthetic matches the expectation of that end market. Producibility. This is where R&D and really doing the engineering is important. If a product can't be produced effectively, cost effectively, and time effectively, then the production method needs to be revisited so that there is consistency in the product. Profitability, of course, it needs to make sense economically for both the producer and the buyer, and it needs to be a product that will help to sustain the organization. And finally, differentiation, which is something we all know is very important. Whether that's an attractive material or a material that's specific to your country, or packaging or design that you have infused into a product, differentiability is very important to all consumers and gives a business a competitive edge. So the benefits of quality control. This is one of those points that I always tend to go on about too much, because I believe quality control is really a critical area of management for a sustainable business. Quality control can bring so much the word I'm looking for, I'm sorry, it brings a lot of consistency to your production line, and with consistency comes the ability to serve and replicate. So the benefits of quality control are more than just a good quality product. It actually impacts your entire production process. A good quality control system will reduce the amount of defects in a product, and that will save costs in both labor and material. That will also reduce waste and scrap and increase pollution. It allows you the ability to create a system that can produce a quality over a longer period of time in a consistent manner. It provides satisfied customers who have an expectation of a product and receive that product consistently. It also provides employees an understanding, a motivation, and an awareness of the quality standard of the product, so that can be then replicated on a consistent basis. So this aspect of education for your staff is, in my opinion, one of the most important things. And that understanding of quality and quality awareness can naturally increase productivity and overall efficiencies in your production process. So I can't say enough about the importance of quality control and having good quality control systems in place, particularly when you're reaching out to export markets. And now this is just some pointers, some tips that relate to some hidden costs that can happen when you're working with an export buyer in the United States or in any export region. Sometimes if your business is more regionally based, some of these costs don't come up. And because they are hidden, they can erode your profit margin if you're not considering them in your initial price quotations with your products to export markets. So some that I have seen, and some of the companies I've worked with in the Southern African region have shared some of these with me. And they have been part of my experience as well when doing sales and promotion of products to the US market. So sample development fees, including shipping fees. So many times US buyers may be very interested in your product. They may like your materials, your design aesthetic, your price point, but they want or need to make some development changes that will serve their customers more effectively. So they'll ask you to do sample development work. You just need to be sure that you have your terms and conditions laid out for how you will approach that. So what is the fee? How long will it take? What's the most effective method of shipping to get it to the customer on time? Because it's going to be going into a meeting, and if it misses the meeting, you may miss the order. All of these things have to be thought out at the beginning of the process so that you don't lose the opportunity. Third-party testing. Can't say enough about this. And there will be more said about this, I think, later in the program. Many companies will require particular third-party testing, which means your product goes to a third-party lab and is tested for various quality assurance and performance indicators. Crock testing, which is dyes don't rub off onto fabrics, flammability testing, lead testing. And so it's not an incredibly expensive process, but it is usually on the supplier to absorb this cost. So it's something you want to ask, do you require third-party testing? If you do, what tests are required? Do you have a lab that you work with? This helps you to then incorporate those costs into your final price prior to negotiating with the buyer. Barcodes, labels, coming from Asia, and the shipping costs associated. This happens a lot for larger brands. Their barcodes that they use come from a particular manufacturer that they've worked with, and you need to order those and have them shipped from Hong Kong or from their location for your production. And so again, you have to consider those costs into your price of manufacturing. This one gets us occasionally, which is additional packaging, packing materials, and even being asked to pick and pack for different locations. So this would increase your need for packing materials. You may have an order that needs to be picked and packed to go to 10 different locations because those distribution centers go out to 10 different stores or e-commerce warehouses. So it is definitely a service that is included at times in order writing, and something that you should be asking. How many distribution centers are we shipping to? Do we pick and pack for individual doors? Do we pick and pack for retail? Do we pick and pack for e-com? And then finally, the buyer's manual. And I'm sure many of you have had the experience where you've gotten the buyer's manual, it's 500 pages, and you're like, what do I do with this? And there's just a blanket statement. Follow the buyer's manual so you don't have a chargeback. So this can be a bit of a daunting task. Some of the things I've mentioned here are indicated in the buyer's manual. Most of the time, companies understand, if you're working with them for the first time, that you will have questions. And so taking your time and walking through that is important. Oh, excuse me. Locations and logistics. I always recommend to the companies that I work with to understand simple logistic costs and logistic suppliers in your region that can ship to the market that you're looking to target. In many cases, some buyers are new to these parts of the world and may not have the contacts. In other cases, they may have freight forwarders that they use all around the world. But if you can provide information to them about what carriers serve your area, who that point of contact is, what a general cost might be, this helps to provide confidence and helps the company understand what some of the logistics challenges might be and how to mitigate those in an effort to move your goods into their market. Beth mentioned AGOA, and we're all here in some form of capacity to help maximize the AGOA opportunity between the United States and the African countries that are AGOA approved. I would say don't always assume that your buyer understands AGOA. Take the opportunity to explain the duty savings that AGOA offers in your particular product classifications. In some cases, it can be up to 30% savings. We are salesmen, and so it's important for us to sell this opportunity, because with duty savings that high can really be a very strong competitive advantage on price, while also differentiating supply chain management and new locations. So it can really be a win-win for both the African producers and the exporters to the United States and the consumers. But don't assume that it's clear to everyone the way it's clear to you, and use it as a selling tool. What are some of the advantages of sourcing in South Africa? Of course, we've talked about the AGOA duty categories. Diversification, Beth mentioned this as well, the importance of diversification and expanding in one of the fastest growing markets. Socially responsible supply chains, supporting Black and women-owned businesses. This is becoming more and more important to the US consumer, and is something I think that will continue to grow and become important to consumers looking to diversify and support different types of businesses. Vetted capacity in new regions through the South Africa Trade and Investment Hub, small batch manufacturers using handmade skills, something that is very trend relevant in the US market right now, and the ability to do branded collaborations with exceptional young designers. This is an aspect of marketing that has become very popular, where larger brands want to bring younger brands under their wing and do a branded collaboration. And so there's exceptional young talent in Southern Africa for these opportunities to continue or to multiply. Thank you very much to the South Africa Trade and Investment Hub, to Messe Frankfurt, to USAID, and to the panelists. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope the information I shared helps you in your business.
Thank you very much, Lene, for such an insightful presentation. We hope that firms will continue to reach out and get this information, because it is very critical. It's not just what we produce, but how we get it to the consumer, and more importantly, are we competitive? We'll move on to the next presentation by Mark. Mark Jagger is the Vice President, Stakeholder Engagement for RAP, which is the Worldwide Responsible Accredited Production. And in this role, Mark is responsible for global operations, and RAP is an independent, objective, and non-profit team of social compliance experts that are dedicated to promoting safe, lawful, humane, and ethical manufacturing around the world. This they do through certification and education. Mark has served on the board of directors for RAP for 16 years, including 4 years as a secretary. Before joining RAP in September 2020, Mark worked for 27 years in the apparel industry. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Tammy. You should be able to see my screen and my chart at this point. And I want to thank USAID, the Southern African Trade Hub, All Fashion, Beth, and Lene. Lene, great charts. I love the pictures, but I also love the advice even more. So thank you. As Tammy mentioned, I work for RAP. RAP is a small nonprofit association based in the United States, but with a global footprint. And RAP, in a nutshell, certifies socially responsible production. And I'm going to take a few minutes today and talk about how that happens, and then why that's important to the U.S. buyer. So I'll cover a few topics in my agenda today: social compliance and why that matters to U.S. buyers. Once you decide on being socially compliant, why RAP is the best tool for you and your factory to achieve that social compliance, document it and demonstrate it to the U.S. buyer. I'll give you a very high-level overview of what a RAP certification process would entail. And I'll take a few minutes at the end and talk about how COVID-19 has impacted the social compliance industry and how it's impacted RAP. So really, the first question to address is, why does social compliance matter to U.S. buyers? And I've put forward several reasons, and let me just cover each of these. So reason one is probably the penultimate reason, and that's to protect the reputation of the buyer. The buyer has worked to build their brand, to build their image, to build their connection to the U.S. consumer, and values that brand and image quite high. And so to maintain that reputation, most responsible U.S. buyers will insist on at least a minimum floor of demonstrated social compliance in production of apparel, and particularly in the fashion apparel. Reason two, although the employees at the producing factory are not employees of the buyer, it's a given that the buyer and its management have a concern for the health and safety of the employees producing the apparel. They do not want to see injuries or difficulties with construction around the building. They want safe and effective partners in factories producing their apparel. Reason three, very straightforward: ensure the facility meets the local legal requirements. Again, a brand does not want to contract with a maker only to find out that they're skirting local requirements. It raises responsiveness from the factory in terms of getting the goods delivered, but it also impacts reason one in terms of the reputation of the buyer. Reason four, and Lene referred to this, the U.S. consumer is increasingly insisting on a more transparent supply chain. They're also insisting on socially responsible practices within that supply chain. RAP is a way to demonstrate that you're socially responsible. And reason five, and Beth alluded to this also, U.S. laws are increasingly regulating supply chains on very high profile issues like forced labor. Programs like RAP and other social compliance schemes address things like forced labor. So these are a handful of reasons, and there are others that you should consider achieving and demonstrating social compliance in your production before you begin export or attempting to export to the United States. So you want to be socially responsible, you want to demonstrate you're socially responsible, and you're going to ask next, how do we do that? One approach is to work with RAP. Now, why would you do that? First of all, RAP is the world's largest independent factory-based certification program focused on apparel, footwear, and sewn product sectors. RAP has been doing this business for 20 years, and it's gotten pretty good at it. And we've been able to grow our certification base significantly over this period. RAP inspects and certifies factories all over the world. So we're taking the experience we've gained in difficult places, including Bangladesh and Southeast Asia, and apply that to our certification process. RAP is objective. We don't line up with the buyers in the United States, and we don't line up solely with the sellers. We're an in-between nonprofit with global expertise dedicated to achieving safe and lawful manufacturing around the world. And we do it again through certification that you're socially responsible, and education through things like this seminar today. RAP has also become a program of choice for industry associations in the US. We have great relationships with many associations that are centered in the Washington area where RAP is based. And you heard from Beth today at the AAFA, RAP is the official corporate social responsibility partner for the AAFA. So another reason to consider RAP is the footprint I mentioned. So I'll share a few statistics with you this afternoon. The top 10 countries for RAP certification in 2019 were China, with about 770 factories, followed by Vietnam, where RAP certified 524 factories. And then shortly after that, Bangladesh at 331 and India at 269. And you can see the rest of the list here. Now, it's no surprise that the concentration of certifications also correlates with countries that do the largest volume of exports to the United States. But you can also see that some countries are rising, and RAP intentionally focuses its resources on regions where there's great potential, including Africa and also, in particular, Southern Africa region. In 2019, RAP received over 3,000 applications for factories to become certified. And again, these are factories in the sewn product sector, primarily apparel, but also travel goods, footwear, and tier 2 and 3 facilities supporting each of those types of industries. And currently, and we track this information very closely, there are over 2,700 RAP facilities that are certified, representing and covering almost 2.7 million workers across 40 countries. So one of the things that RAP focuses on as a nonprofit, we're not driven to return shareholder value or to pay a dividend. One of the key indicators and metrics for RAP is how many employees at any given point in time are working in a RAP certified facility. If it's a RAP certified facility, we feel we're moving our mission forward of certifying socially responsible production, and that's a benefit to the buyer and a benefit to the seller. So what is RAP's 12 principles or core scheme for socially responsible factories? First of all, these principles are familiar probably to 90% or so to all the other schemes that are out there, and they derive from international norms like the ILO core conventions around labor. RAP developed these principles, as I mentioned, 20 years ago, and they're modified and updated periodically. But the fact that these 12 have remained basically in place for that period of time demonstrates the importance of each of these. And I'll just make a comment or two on what RAP looks at for a factory to demonstrate compliance with these principles. First of all, as I've mentioned previously, demonstrating compliance with local laws. Are you paying the wages specified, or at least the minimum wages specified in your factory? Are there any indications that labor is not free to move? If it's forced labor, that's a problem with Principle 2. Is there any evidence that child labor exists in your facility? If there is, you have a problem with Principle 3. Principle 4, RAP interviews employees. If there's evidence or reports of employees being harassed or abused at work, that'll come forward and could be a concern under Principle 4. Principle 5 is document intensive. What did you say you're going to pay your employees? And have you demonstrated that you've paid those wages? Likewise with benefits. Principle 6 varies by region, by country, where there are different caps on the number of hours per day, per week, per month that can be worked. Are you following those limits, or have you obtained an exception for those limits for a stated lawful reason? Principle 7 deals with prohibition of discrimination, and it's wide-ranging discrimination across most of the designated types and classes that are prohibited in international norms. 8 deals with health and safety, and I talked a little bit about that already, but are the aisles wide enough? Are the doors and the fire exits, can they be operated? Do employees know how to evacuate the facility? Is the facility itself sound? RAP is not going to give you an engineering opinion on your building, but we're going to observe concerns, and those will be covered in your monitor report. Principle 9 is freedom of association and collective bargaining. Paragraph 10, and Lene talked a little bit about the importance of the environment. RAP expects that you'll follow your environmental regulations and you'll pursue principles of reuse and conservation within your operation. And principle 11 and 12 run together, and essentially they ask that you have a secure supply chain to the United States. This is important for RAP certification, but it also becomes a twin benefit of the RAP program, in that RAP's approach is every facility is monitored once a year against these principles. This will allow you to demonstrate to the U.S. Customs authorities that you take security of your shipments seriously, and will help you demonstrate that you meet what's called the CTPAT requirements that most likely your buyer is already committed to meeting. And there are basic requirements within Principle 11 and 12 which will help you demonstrate that. So those are RAP's principles. The certification process at a high level, it's pretty straightforward. There's a website, just refresh this week, cleaner and easier to use. If you're interested in RAP for the first time, you fill out the application on the website. When you're ready, you submit your $11.95 $1,200 fee to RAP. That's it. That's the fee that RAP takes in a certification process, and it happens at the registration stage. You can have you can download or have already downloaded the RAP self-assessment tool, which will help you do your own assessment and prepare for an eventual audit. There's no charge for that, and you can download that at any time. And then when you're ready, an evaluation audit will be conducted. And this will be an unannounced visit, and it'll be from a monitor that RAP has both selected, trained, and approved. That monitor will show up within a window of time, that's 30 days, and will be expected to access your facility and do what you would expect to happen: a facility tour, employee interviews, management interviews, and that intensive document review around pay and benefits and related information, all to be verified against the RAP 12 principles. A detailed report of that audit process is delivered by the monitor directly to RAP in Arlington, Virginia, where RAP's trained staff reviews that report and identifies if there are any non-compliances to RAP principles, and if there's a plan that was put in place to remedy those, or if it's a, quote, clean audit. Clean audit, or one that has non-compliances that have been addressed, will result in a certification. Certification is valid for 1 year in most cases. And you're not done yet, because this is an ongoing process to maintain your social responsibility and compliance with RAP. RAP has a post-certification assessment process where we go out and randomly follow up on up to 20% of the certified factories to make sure at no cost to the factory that you're continuing to follow the principles. That's the certification process. So you can't just register, pay your fee, and expect to pass the RAP scheme. Instead, you're going to have to, and we encourage you, particularly the first time through, to download that self-assessment tool, decide how you're going to set up your management systems to document compliance with the 12 principles. It's going to take a commitment from top management, and you're likely going to need to identify one or more individuals to take the lead. Many factories have a designated compliance manager. Sometimes it's also within the HR function, but it's a person who is responsible for driving across the entire operation commitment to the RAP 12 principles. And then again, it's not a checklist, but it's an audit to see that you've both adopted programs, you've deployed them, and that you're actively pursuing throughout the year compliance with the RAP principles. And we'll need to see the documentation. That's what the auditors come to look at. It will require continuous education of your employees, and certain things will have to be demonstrated, like evacuation drills and so forth. But that's the implementation process at a high level. So I'll just take a minute now and talk about how that process has changed under COVID-19. And it has had a wide-ranging impact on RAP and all compliance schemes. So RAP is operating virtually in the US at the moment. Our team works primarily over Zoom and emails. Our field offices in Hong Kong and in Bangladesh and in Europe are more or less back to normal, in Southeast Asia in particular. And so they're able to come back into the office. They're able to do post-certification assessments. They're able to work with monitors subject to local restrictions to go in and do on-site inspections. Where they can't, RAP instituted an alternative desktop assessment. And basically that says if you're certified before your certification expires, go ahead and apply for an alternative desktop assessment, and you'll get an extension of 4 months once you undergo a virtual audit with one of the RAP monitors. And that essentially extends your certification until an on-site audit is possible. And RAP has had, in some cases, to defer doing new factory audits where restrictions are in place locally. So we've adjusted to COVID, we've worked with the monitors, we've worked with the factories, and we feel we found a way to continue to move forward and achieve these certifications that buyers still are insisting on. So maybe a final point, why RAP? I like this quote. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. And if you think about that, you'll do things differently. And that's from Warren Buffett, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. And I might point out, Berkshire Hathaway also owns Fruit of the Loom. Fruit of the Loom has been a long-time supporter of RAP, and we've certified a number of their facilities, and they see the value in that. So I want to thank you for your time and attention today, and would welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. And once again, thank you to all our panel of experts.